I've been part of the pharmaceutical industry for most of my professional life, and this morning I will focus on pharmaceutical innovation. Of course, it's impossible to talk about pharmaceutical innovation without broader context of healthcare economics, and I'm going to try to weave that topic into our discussion as well as in our breakout session this morning. So let me start by pointing your attention to the following. If you were to look at the pharmaceutical annual report of any large pharmaceutical company, most likely you will see the word innovation. In 2007, top pharmaceutical companies spent over $115 billion on pharmaceutical R&D. In US alone, the number is around 60 billion. In Europe, it's close to 40. So you could see that every major pharmaceutical company is trying to buy, discover, or buy innovation. Yet success seems to be continues to be very elusive. If you were to look at the recent report from Tufts Center for Study of Drug Development, the average cost of R&D for new pharmaceutical entity is close to $900 million US dollars. Some studies actually estimate that that number is closer now to 2 billion, depending on pharmaceutical company or therapeutic area. Meanwhile, the number of genuinely new pharmaceutical entities that are getting approved by FDA, for example, last year, FDA only approved 24 new molecular entities, and that is the lowest number since 1983. The commercial performance of pharmaceutical products that have been launched continues to be also very difficult, very disappointing. PwC report that was issued this year shows that only 4 big pharmas have earned more than 10% of their revenue from the products that have been launched in the last 5 years. This poor track record has fueled pharma's passion for pharmaceutical innovation even more. And I think some of the pundits, industry pundits, have proclaimed that the pharmaceutical blockbuster model is dead. P.J. Garnier, ex-CEO of GSK, has actually put it in the following way. He said that we have a business model where you're guaranteed to lose your entire book of business every 10 to 12 years. So the best way to find something is to begin with clear understanding what is it we're looking for. What precisely is innovation? How does one recognize it when they see it? Does innovation mean the same thing to everyone in healthcare? And if you were to ask pharmaceutical company after investing $1 billion on each new products that have been launched, whether they have been able to reap their benefits as well as at the fair rate of return, I think too many pharmaceutical companies would only say maybe. The environment in which pharmaceutical industry is operating is also becoming more and more hostile. I think that if you were to read our paper, BT's Pharma 2016, or PwC's 2020 thought leadership, it's going to be much more difficult to rely on US as the last bastion where you can continue to get premium pricing and the investment model, which is no longer generating the adequate return on risk. More importantly, the gap, what the industry believes the market will pay and what the healthcare world at large is willing or really considers to be a value is beginning to increase. And that gap will continue to get wider and wider as the number of chronic diseases, both in developing world as well as in developed world, continues to be on the rise. So what is pharmaceutical innovation? It has been defined in many different ways. Pharmaceutical industry typically, over the last century, has defined it along clinical lines rather than economic lines. So it could be a question of whether it cures the condition or disease, whether it prevents disease, lowers the level of mortality, morbidity, improves the quality of life. All of those factors could be considered to be in line with innovation. Also, most experts distinguish between step changes in the industry, such as discovery of the first statin to measurably lower the level of cholesterol in serum, versus, let's say, new antibiotic, 4th generation antibiotic, which capable of taking care of a number of infections. So, and the industry has been willing to reward step changes at a much greater rate than, let's say, some of the more incremental changes. So the question really about innovation should be defined not only who determines whether the product is innovative, but one can define a number of stakeholders who participate in the process. So for example, a researcher who identifies the new molecule and its potential. It then moves on to investor who backs the initial with belief and backs initial belief with capital. The regulator who approves the breakthrough labeling claim, and the manufacturer who commits resources to production and promotion of the new treatment. Once the medicine has reached the market, it is the healthcare payer that is paying the premium price for it, or willing to pay the premium price for it. The provider, by choosing it over other therapies, and then, of course, the patient, who acknowledges that it works and is willing to take it in a correct fashion. If the product fails to convince any of these stakeholders, the results could be very devastating. The product may never get approved, they may never get to market, and so on. However, not all of these referees are equally important. The dynamics of the pharma industry, it's basically a perishable product model where you have to reap the rewards and demand the premium price, while the period of exclusivity, which is typically anywhere from 10 to 12 years, is still there. And you need to generate pretty healthy ROI during that period of time in order to continue to invest into your business model. The need for fair returns make the healthcare payer, though, the ultimate referee on whether the product is considered to be innovative. Moreover, the payer is probably the most constrained. High claim costs can, at any given year, can limit the ability for the payer to pay the premium price on the product. It may put the purchaser of the premium completely out of that market. So in effect, the question about innovation really rests in the hands of a healthcare payer for the most part. Innovation can be defined as such as innovation is what the payer is willing to pay a premium price, and the payer's value system for defining innovation is the most important element in consideration whether to make investment into new products. Yet most pharma companies have traditionally considered the payer's perspective quite casually during the R&D process, and typically only toward the very end. A number of companies have now, such as Amgen, for example, started doing very much comparative clinical trials where they take their product or their potential product and begin to run clinical trials head-to-head to determine what is the, what is the comparative value of their product. In the past, a lot of pharmaceutical companies have been able to overcome this issue by very aggressive sales and marketing. But even that is becoming much more difficult. The cost of SG&A for pharmaceutical industry have risen to about 33%. And that is also very much unsustainable model. Moreover, pharmacoeconomic evaluations are becoming much more increasingly dominant. If you look at a number of countries have established agencies. In UK, there is an organization called NICE, which basically determines whether there is pharmaceutical value and enough innovation, and it has to be considered in terms of price on whether the product is going to gain acceptance in the marketplace. The challenges facing the industries as it seeks to secure premium pricing are becoming even more compounded. Whereas in the 90s, most of the pharmaceutical entities that reached the market have been more traditional pharmaceutical entities, such as, there would be prescribed to over 1.2, 1.5 million patients. Whereas a lot of the drugs that are going to be entering the market over the next 5 to 10 years are going to be considered to be specialty pharmaceuticals or targeted treatment solutions. And if you were to think about that, if these are in the targeted treatment solutions, most likely they will not be the type of therapies that will be geared at 1.2, 1.5 million patients. These are going to be the therapies that will be geared maybe at 1,200, maybe 1,300, 1,500 patients. So now when you think about the R&D pharmaceutical model, And let's say if you're thinking about a cholesterol drug, which is taken by 1.4, 1.6 million patients, and the cost of development was $868 million. That means that the break-even point per patient is about $543. If you're thinking about a targeted treatment solution, which is only going to be prescribed to about 1,200 to 1,500 patients, and we're not talking about Lorenzo's oil, which is only for 300 to 400 patients, but even in the situation where we're looking at 1,500 patients, the break-even point now is 850,000, astronomical number, 850,000 per patient. So it is no surprise that these specialty therapies typically sell anywhere between 10,000 and 50,000. So you can look at Herceptin or Gleevec and those therapies which demand and that level of pricing. So that's why it's so important to understand payers' perspective when it comes to pharmaceutical innovation. So what options exist, right? And I think that the whole idea of collaboration in this industry is becoming so much more important than it was in the past. No pharmaceutical company can do it alone. And there are a number of examples that we can discuss during breakout sessions. One that comes to mind that is a recent development, and it's called Pistoia Alliance. And Pistoia Alliance is a collaboration between GSK, AstraZeneca, Novartis, and Pfizer, mainly focused on sharing early preclinical data, where pharmaceutical companies will be able to deposit information, mainly tox studies, some of the early genomic, proteomic information. They'll be able to share as much as they wish. The applications will become available in the cloud. A lot of the data pipelining, computational workflow automation type applications will be available. And the more you contribute to that environment, the less expensive it becomes for you to use it. So those are some of the options that exist. The other areas which certainly can be explored, and that is virtual clinical trials, simulation and modeling. One interesting quote that comes to mind by Chief Executive Officer of Entelos, a company that develops solutions for simulation of clinical trials. If airplane industry were to develop airplanes the way pharmaceutical industry develops drugs, they would build 10 planes, they would fly all 10 of them, and the one that didn't crash, that would be the one that they would sell. And we know that's not the option anymore, and those are the things that certainly need to be improved. And those people that say, well, those models don't work, I think that, again, the system of prizes and the opportunity to be much more innovative in this space, we can develop these models, and some of these models for diabetes and asthma already exist, and they can certainly, we can run and lower the cost of clinical trials by being able to run some of them simulated fashion and develop protocols based on results that come from simulation and modeling.